Okay. And we're live. Okay, we're back.
Hello.
We are back to this episode is the future of learning English as a second language. And I am here with the founder of anywhereesl.com, Chris Ryan. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Why, thank you for having me, Jonathan. It sounds the website is incredibly new, so it's still kind of weird to talk about as a living thing.
Well, I have to say, maybe we can have a chat after this recording is done, and we can talk about investing because I think you're sitting on a gold mine right now.
Nice.
I
honestly, I think so. But
when you told me about this new venture, and now that I'm seeing it live, I am so stoked for you. I think.
cool.
I think you have picked the perfect time to do this. And you just had to wait until a pandemic had struck the entire globe. And you're jumping on that, and it is the business opportunity of the century.
Well, dang, just back up the gold bullion then, and we'll see.
So I want to I should properly introduce the show, actually. I'm your host, Jonathon Narvey, if you've been listening to this show already, The Future of. And so I wanted Chris Ryan to be able to provide maybe his own origin story. You're a guy who, like many of my guests, maybe needs no introduction, but for some of my guests, you will. So,
I think everyone will.
Why are you the best person to be talking about the future of learning English as a second language?
Basically, it's because it's been like not it's been a conscious choice, but it's not been like a active choice in my life, an active choice to be like, I'm going to teach English and spread the language. It's just something I fell into, and again, it's kind of the problem, but the solution that presents itself now. Which I'm originally from Ontario, moved out to BC back in the '90s with all the other Ontario people. Whistler, had a great time, and then was looking to do something else, move out, try other things. Then there's an ad in the paper: teach English in Japan, teach English overseas. What the heck? And so did it. And that was 1998. And, went to Japan and ended up in a small town. It was brilliant. Unfortunately, it was in the area most people now know because of Fukushima. But it's an awesome place. But, I came back, finished university. And, I'm working construction in London, Ontario. And, a friend is like, hey, South Korea. You ever heard of Gangnam? And at that time, no, Gangnam style didn't exist because this was 1990. And so, basically, then he's like, come on over. There's a job, great pay. And he's like, there's so much opportunity, it's stupid. So, then I ended up in Seoul, Korea for 3 years. And the first year I worked at a big sort of international school. And it was, again, to kind of highlight the demand. I was the first, I got kind of screwed around, but in an interesting way about my visa. Because my company was trying to say, well, we're not an ESL company. We're trainers, like corporate trainers. And so normally ESL teachers get like an E4 or something like that. And I was this first person to get an E2. So technically, just like as if I was some sort of engineer from IBM, it would be the same kind of concept. So this is what the school was pushing. Of course, that ended up to be bad. And I ended up in the immigration offices like 3 times because of this. And that was not so great. But I ended up staying 2 more years, and I would have stayed, forever. Then I come back to Vancouver, and I'm trying to go to journalism. Unfortunately, it's dead. Who wants to work for $10 an hour in a small town, unfortunately? And all this time, though, there's just this like vacuum of demand for ESL. So again, even when I'm at journalism school, I was like, I'll just go and teach some Koreans on the side. They need the help. They pay the money. It's fantastic, and that's how it happened. And in fact, then I don't know. Do you remember the first place we met?
Well, it was at In Lingua, was it not?
No,
The
we met actually one time previous to that, which was awesome. Because that's when I came back to here and I was like, okay, I'm going to get legitimate. Because actually I started playing music and things started kind of happening on that front. So I was like, can't just go do private tutoring anymore, which was great, but I need some stability and pay taxes. And so I started looking around, and then they kept hearing this like, well, Languages Canada, are you TESOL Canada certified? And I was like, what the hell is this? Look it up. It's not much. It's an industry credential, but they won't even accept your resume. So I started subbing and VEC. I went into sub for one children's class, and then I was like, I met you there. And then in Lingua, I was like, hey, I remember you from VEC.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't remember that we predated to In Lingua, and so I don't like to usually interrupt the guest when they're giving their origin story, but the thing is,
Please.
Chris and my history do overlap. We go back many years, and in fact, our stories are somewhat similar in a sense, because I also did the teach English as a second language thing in Korea, and this was like a lot of young Canadian men who were averse to hard labor of working in the oil fields. We decided to go off and explore Asia and maybe earn a few bucks teaching English and hopefully have an interesting cultural experience, which we did. And so I had an interesting time, in fact, and I was very tempted to stay there. And, you know, it was actually a wonderful experience for me to teach overseas, but I felt like my destiny was back in Canada. So I wound up coming back here, trying to make it in the journalism space. I was a very middling freelance journalist for a while, and then ESL kind of paid the bills, and then I stuck with it for a while, and then my own career trajectory has bounced around a few times, to the point where finally I found myself the founder of a public relations agency in Vancouver. But for many years, I was teaching English as a second language to foreign students, and it was a good living, and it was interesting and fun. And I want to get back to you, though, your story.
Well, this is my point. Like, you couldn't have actually summed it up better, which is like, and this is what we talk about, and people may balk at first, because we think of English, first of all, as this, connection to culture. And that's kind of stop. There's two kinds of English. There's English, which is Anglo-Saxon connected, like Canada and colonies and all this kind of stuff. And in our language, we directly relate that to meaningful culture that, or whatever, it can be judged. But, English also exists globally as like a computer language. Like JavaScript, is JavaScript. And it's used in countries all over the world the same way, because it's doing what it's supposed to do. And that's English. And what, your point is the best example. Like, we just had this constant kind of piggy bank that we could be like, let me try this. And you're like, I'll just go back and talk to people in English. And I say that because that's what people envision. You just go talk to people in English. And you're like, sure, that is a part of it. But, when we talk about language learning, first of all, it's easy to break that in. I think it's simplistic, but, writing and speaking, grammar, vocabulary choice, content specific, right? Things open up. But Canadians are ignorant to that, and to, in general, and the government is the reason. It's actually like, all the governments since basically the 80s have, treated it as kind of this international sort of product and service concept and left it to private industry. But, so Canadians have no idea the power of it, and to go back to like, look what you were able to do. And I remember like, my biggest regrets in life was as you were starting this awesome project of creating a full Vancouver-based ESL program, right? I think that was like beginner level, et cetera, audio recordings and everything. And we were going to do video. And then my band started getting crazy and I was like, okay, yeah, that was totally unreliable. But, there's a great example of you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you understand the demand, you understand how to make it not some generic products, right? But something that's applicable and local, right? That creates other things that happen, which is what we want in economies, right? I think, you want the pebble in the water and things spread out instead of sucking the water up. But, that's it, so basically what I just to cut right to the chase, I think all cities should have like a standard learning management system as part of them, as well as basic training for and awareness that there are like 1.5 billion people in the world, and a lot of them are actually in our own country, who are desperate to improve their English and speak to people. And so, of course, that makes sense to base that on what people want to talk about, like their subjects. And that's individuals. That's not some grammar book that comes down to you. There's not some, whatever, which is what we're seeing. But, people sharing. And, that. So, for example, when people talk about the internet as a utility, absolutely. This learning, should be a utility. But our governments they don't get it. I'm just curious,
Right.
like in your experience, when you talk to people about being an ESL teacher, what was your general response from people?
Well, it didn't work for me in bars. I can tell you that. Yeah. So, I do want to answer your question more fully, but I also want to provide a bit of context before we get into how government is fucking things up. Let's yeah. I want to provide a bit more context for people who are maybe new to the idea, and you introduced it very well, of the English language as something that is a resource that is sold, that there's an entire industry it's global. Millions of dollars, many millions of dollars are spent on English instruction because it is a global language of business and communication and travel. And it's sort of, I can't say it's unprecedented, but in the past there have been international languages like Latin and French and Spanish, and English is so dominant. And there are many reasons for that. I think, I may be screwing this up, but I'm pretty sure it was Winston Churchill who talked about the English language as the greatest export of the English speaking peoples is the language itself, because and it's been used, like you think about it outside of the context of business, just in terms of just the prevalence of English in the Indian subcontinent, like obviously completely different part of the world, different culture, and yet this was a uniter of peoples who who could at least conduct themselves in business and government in a language that did not develop indigenously, and yet that this is useful to them. And so this is, whether you're in China, Japan, India, anywhere in the world, almost, it's very useful to have English, and not just in business, but that's why there's so much demand. If you're in, let's say you're Chinese and you want to travel in Europe, learn English. You'll get by in most places. So of course there's demand, so that, folks like when I was young and had very few skills, I took a course in how to teach. Um, but this was a way that I could that we could make a living, and many people do in schools all around the world. We're training people to communicate in a way that opens up the whole world to them. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, provide some context, because I don't have the numbers handy on like the size of the marketplace, like
It's massive. It's like because the thing is, it's like, when you do your, so I did a master's in 2012, 13 or something about that. And it was about, basically I was like, Australia is like 10 years at the time, and still very probably further, way ahead of us in success and all this sort of stuff. And how does that happen? Because most people, when they talk about English literature, they'll bring up Australia too much, or English language, but it's amazing, right? It's one of the top dogs. So what the whole key is, like, there's so many people that need to learn English but can't. So this is what I mean. It's like the demand, the supply is nowhere near meeting the demand. And like, were you in Korea for what, 1 year? How long were you there again?
I was there for 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, when I was there, I got radio offers. I did editing for fire department stuff. I helped do international marketing for a toy gun, because I'm just a dude who speaks really great English and I sound American. It didn't help, and I'll just say whatever, but like, if you have blue eyes, you're already making more money, unfortunately. But and that's the thing, it is a commodity. People with, for example, Irish accents, British accents from many schools, they would be offered less money because students wanted to sound like Americans, right? So, again, this is, and, to go back, there's like a short TED Talk back from like 2006, and some inventor talking about it. And of course, it was super general strokes and not so great, but, that's what he's saying. This is being pulled. People are like, holy crap, I need English, and whether it's true or not is irrelevant. That's the whole point. And there's no effective supply right now that's being utilized that, there's this maybe lower level of free or exchange. But, one of the cool things, again, going back to, you said, this market, what was shown was like, when people pay for something, when English learning programs, especially up until the 80s, were free, there was a lot of corruption. What it was like corrupt governments or other rich people in other countries that could pick and choose who they wanted to go to these countries to learn. Once they started charging a nominal fee, what they found was, instead of being like, you're excluding the poor people, it allowed these people that have a focus, to start investing, saving money, as long as the rates are reasonable, and so when I kind of go back to what's the market is like stupid demand with tiny supply, that is also like, what's the warped, as we see. Languages Canada just released a report saying they expect 75 to 90% of ESL schools in Canada to be done because of this pandemic.
Right.
And,
Okay. I want to interject right there.
Yeah, please, because you know me.
well, just for the audience, who, if you have come across this video 5 years from now, so we're right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and so of all the industries that have been disrupted, teaching English in a classroom, that's just not a thing that happens right now. And so, the world is having to adapt. Hence, Chris has created anywhereesl.com to meet that demand. So I'll let you take it from there.
Oh, well, okay, because they do segue, because that was the whole thing. Like, once I did this master's online, what I saw was all these great tools, but no impetus, no practicality. And going back to English language learning, I mean, if you don't have something to talk about, it's kind of hard to give a crap about vocabulary and grammar, So it was that kind of concept where, here is a way of all these people who have amazing experience with teaching in a classroom. And like the average, my last school I was at would average 6 different countries per classroom with an average class size of say 12 or 13 students. So, you have these people in a room sharing this struggle of grammar and vocabulary, so they're united in the best way possible. And, there's these teachers that have responded monthly, in these same focused teaching points according to levels where they are. And, yes, then as too, practice, just the ability to go screw up as you're actually playing the game. But you do need a coach, right? You do need these levels. And AnywhereESL.com started as a concept where I wanted the government, especially the city of Vancouver, to build its own learning management system. And I would, always recommend WordPress. But, a learning management system, because the demand here, I could, I even have part-time taught in, little strip malls out in Richmond, out in Coquitlam, and these are, little Korean schools run by Koreans, and they get, the foreigner to come in and be the teacher. And, we also then have like Thinkific, which is probably one of the bigger software success stories, I think, in Vancouver that creates its own education. Buddy Boss, which is what I use for AnywhereESL.com, is a Burnaby-based company that sells an awesome socialized theme that fits in with like LMS stuff. And I was like, this whole concept that government is bad and that business must provide is just like missing, it's the peanut butter and chocolate. Like, did nobody think that they would be good together? Was it an accident? And, just to kind of that. So I tried that route for a while. And, in the industry, no one was, when you're making money, because there's always demand, investing is not in the cards as much. They're just like, well, why invest any money? Because we're making money. We'll just keep doing what we do and we make money. So, and so that's why we're at where we're at. But AnywhereESL.com is not unfortunately, in my opinion, but I had to go then this business route, pure business route of going, look, all these schools are closing and these students, thousands of students come to BC every year, like 250,000 or something. Of course, that's including the young kids up, but, to learn English and that's crossed over with tourism. So, when they can't, like you said, go to a classroom and do this because that's how they did it before, it doesn't mean they don't need to still do that. And it's the crazy thing is, you look at tech companies, the leading tech companies in China, Korea, and Japan for education are all English language providing platforms. Like massive, they're you'll see like a massive investment made in whatever company. And you're like, what do? They connect English speakers in the world to people in their country. And, I'm like, so, the other thing is, which to connect into the society thing is, as we're kind of talking about, there's this disconnect in our own cities. We have these people who are like, these people can't speak English. And then these people are saying, I went through 10 years of these programs and I got these credentials and these test scores and I can't chat with you, but I can get into your university. So, that's what I mean. So like, that's where ESL is built on, is connecting, technology to, as an infrastructure to facilitate like a social economy, basically.
Well, yeah, like I think it's like I know the Uber example gets overused to the point that it's a cliche, but you really are the Uber of ESL. AnywhereESL.com, you're connecting the students who can't get English instruction anywhere in the world right now in a classroom. It's just not possible. You're
sorry to interrupt.
them.
I heard Australia is opening a few classrooms. Sorry. I don't know if that's good
well,
though. But sorry. I just want to throw that out there.
I guess your business model is fucked.
No, they can't fly there yet, but they've opened their classrooms. Okay. So I just, to be fair.
Okay. So, yeah, there's I don't know what the actual numbers are. Probably millions of people who want to learn English all around the world. And right.
1.5 billion was the estimate in February.
Okay, that's a lot of people who want to learn English, and so you're the Uber of ESL in that you're connecting these students with the teachers. You've already got teachers using the platform and teaching students through it, and it's essentially just makes it easy for the student to find the teacher and vice versa. So that they can do what they need to do. So I think that's, again, yeah, like after this conversation is done, I would love to talk to you about investing in your new enterprise, which is because you're going to be.
I don't have my lawyer with me right now, but
yeah.
we can set it up.
Yeah, so I don't know, where do you see this, where do you see things going now?
Well, to be honest, like, I guess again to kind of, I like to unfortunately articulate too much, but in the simplest sense, what I'm providing and what I'm talking about is, providing a business add-on to people who are naturally a business because they can generate monetary profit, right? Keep that simple. And so, it's that, right now, all I need, I think I've put together a great system for these people to be independent, because the most beautiful thing is it is emergent and expansive, right? In the most philosophical sense, that it can be exponentially scaled as we go. Because of, we're talking about what's the product? Language. And so we don't focus on the language, which unfortunately we've been doing. We focus on why people need to communicate or why they would ever want to talk. And if you provide that connection, conversations are, again, a self-emergent, self-generating thing.
Sure. All these conversations are happening over, I guess, most of the teachers and students using your system are using Zoom. I mean, they're not limited to that, but
Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, and that's the other thing. Let's start giving purpose to tools. I mean, that's, I guess, so I was trying to get to that, which is, same thing. Well, again, instead of meeting someone, you might look at consultants. You go and meet and try to get a lay of the land, get them to know you, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you're you, and eventually at some point your value proposition is defined. So why do you need to physically be there? And that's what like interactive video and technology allows. So, so why not have the possibility to create money and to make money is a really great motivation, and make money for something you're interested in is a great motivation to improve your skills, right? And, sorry, I kind of got up, but and so I look at as an emergent economy, this anywhere ESL. What I hope is I'm empowering these teachers. It sounds cliched, empowering, but I'm just saying you have value. Here is a sales funnel that takes them to a pay and scheduling portal, and you're just going to need to learn the kind of basic modern day tools to present yourself, not sell yourself, present your experience and connect with people. And that's what, again, in the classrooms we used to have like one teacher for like up to 16 students. So how much one-on-one time were they getting anyway? Where's the value necessarily? And students didn't see this, right? Almost any school, any teacher you ask, you will hear them say the same story, which is students complain they don't get to speak English in class. But you're like, you spoke English for an hour. Everybody was. I heard you. We did it. But they, in their minds, think I wasn't speaking to a native speaker.
Right.
Now, again, is that needed? No. It doesn't matter. It's in their head.
Yeah. So I want to get into that, just for people who are unfamiliar with the experience, who haven't taught ESL and aren't quite sure how that works. So in the classroom, what you do is you've got a particular lesson that you want them to focus on. So let's say, I don't know, you could give me, my internet connection is unstable, it's saying. So oh, Jesus, I hope you can hear me. Okay. So yeah, you've got a particular lesson in mind, and it's very limited in what you want to teach. It's either a set of vocabulary or a particular kind of verb construction, past tense, future tense, whatever it is. And so you demonstrate the, how you're speaking. Uh, um, you give many examples, and then you get the student body to talk amongst themselves using the kind of constructions that you've created. So could you give me an example? I've been out of the teaching game for a while. So
Yeah, no, that was where the beauty of what I loved about my old school to a certain extent, because unfortunately it started going back to a more McDonald's delivery of just teach a textbook. But, for example, advertising and design. So that may be the focus, but, indirect statements and indirect questions, like, show me that, can you give me this, instead of, excuse me, I was just wondering, you wouldn't happen to be able to take a look at this right now, would you? Like all of the grammar stuff, a lot of it is just this, whatever, but so polite language related to some sort of topic.
Sure. And then so you would divide up the classroom into pairs, and that you would hear them practicing that conversation that you had modeled for them. And you sort of go around to the various pairs, and you're giving them feedback. It's like, yep, that's exactly it. Keep doing what you're doing. Or, boy, you really fucked up, buddy. Out of my classroom. I never liked you anyway.
Were you in my classrooms? Because I like to be honest.
No, you try to be very supportive, and if they're not quite getting it, you provide constructive feedback. And but yeah, it's exactly as you said. Unless they're speaking one-on-one with you, the teacher, they don't quite know if they're being effective. It's kind of like in martial arts, where you've got that pantomime of violence that
pantomime of violence. I'm gonna start a new band. Sorry, pantomime of violence.
Well, I'm not the first person to talk about this. I'm ruining a metaphor from one of my favorite podcasters, and Sam Harris, and he's taken Brazilian jiu-jitsu for many years, and he's talked about how you're in a martial arts class and you're acting out these moves in a sequence, and let's say you're really good at it, you get the sequence down pat, great. What happens if you go into a bar and the guy next to you he's wanting to fight? Are your moves actually going to work? Did what you learn in the classroom, is that going to apply in real life? And so you don't actually know until it happens. And so we get the same effect in an English ESL classroom, where the students, as confident as they are talking to other students, and you're overseeing that, you're giving them feedback, and they see that, but they're not 100% clear that, can I really speak English in a way that an English speaker is not going to turn away?
Yeah. Well, it's crazy, man. Like it's just statistically significant how many German students have paid a lot of money to fly to Canada to learn English, to come to our classrooms for me to go, what the hell are you doing here? You sound like you were born in Germany, but you're pretty much fluent in English. There you go. And they're like, oh, great. And then they, take off. It's shocking, right? To so much. But, this goes back to, again, the kind of business opportunities in the future, what technology does, which is language is physical, right? Especially English, where we have a lot of indirect language. That whole, like, excuse me, I was just wondering, you wouldn't happen to know stuff. People always think about learning a language so, intellectually. Do you know this? Do you know that? People talk about grammar. Did you know that was an Oxford comma? But it's like when you're nervous, when you're scared, language is muscular. Think about how well you talk when you're frightened. You meet a beautiful, man or woman. You're like, oh. It's like, I know what I want to say. But, this is the point, which kind of goes back to anywhereesl.com. So, number one, I would love to use it to expand teachers' ability to connect all these students. but provide them with actual language learning that's effective, right? In this sense. And because it's this physicality, they need to keep it up. You're like, hey, I went to the gym for 2 months and I lost 10 pounds. So I'm going to stop going to the gym and everything will be aces. And then you're like, oh, I stopped going to the gym and I need to go back because I've gained that weight back. And there is a constant need. So again, Anywhere ESL, which I'm actually most excited about, because again, these are mostly teachers. And when you talk about, marketing and sales or things, they're like, I used to be like, that's bad for education. And you're like, the marketing and sales, well, marketing is just like, here's something you want and here's how you get it, and then finding out, did you find it easy enough, and getting information about that. And that's kind of what my Anywhere ESL, again, what I'm already seeing is any reservations teachers had about reaching out to past students. Word of mouth and an email marketing list are like still the holy grail of online anything, business. And that's built in. Not only is that built in, it's built in with nostalgia. All these teachers had these students who are like living in a foreign country in a room full of different people experiencing insane things, and now you've built this trust, and their cousins, sisters, co-workers, brothers, whatever, love to get this recommendation. And, I would say the same with Canadians, like it's not necessarily a major stereotype that Canadians are nice people once you start talking to them. Anybody is going to be wary in the environment we're living in many cases. But, the thing is, we're a chatty group and we are quite open. Even the most closed-minded are still very quite open about stuff. Yeah. And anyway, so for anywhereesl.com, it's I don't have to worry so much about that. The teachers are actually their own greatest marketing strategy, I think.
Yeah, well, I remember that being a huge perk of the job, was just how friendly the students are, and they love to keep in touch, and they they'll email you, they give you birthday cards, and it's just they love you. If you're a good teacher, and you're nice, and if you've been doing this kind of work for, I don't know, 6 months to a year, you've already got a list of students who love you and probably would love to continue learning English with you at whatever level they're at. And so you have that list. And so if you're one of those teachers, I assume it's really not just in Canada. Like, you could work with pretty much teachers from, who
That's
worked
my next step.
ESL schools. Yeah.
Basically Ireland's screwed. All these other places are screwed. So, I hate to say it. It was like you said earlier, I was like, the only problems I had previous where people had jobs and technology. And if they worked at a school, all of those schools just jumped onto Zoom and did this anyway. And so teachers scrambled and have succeeded. And that's the other thing what WordPress it beautifully does is I have a whole suite of, like, for example, interactive online learning course stuff like Learn-LMS, another local company called LearnBase that has amazing advanced widget sort of natural teacher thing that fits in, all this sort of stuff. Teachers, in my experience, when you give them the tools to teach well, it excites them. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, hey, and then you get that reaction from students. Technology provides that. But, I still wish that I wish there was, like, people knew about it, I guess, in the most basic sense. I just want to go back quickly to, like, so when I did that research about, Canadian international education, 2009, I think it was Harper and Power 2009?
Probably.
I don't know. Yeah, but basically they were like, hey, we're hired an accountant firm, in Vancouver, Kuhn and Associates or whatever, and they said, like, survey international education, because at that time as well, Australia really started kicking off and making money, and expanding, whatever. However, so they went and looked, and I want to read you one quote because I think this sums it up the best. While some organizations completed reports on the economic impact of international education, two things became apparent when following up with them on these studies. First, they have not kept up with the research, so much of the work is out of date. And second, they ran into many of the same problems that we did, no system to gather data in the first place. So since 2009, in 2012, they released the same report. 2014, they just released something that was kind of weird. We're not to get into that. So you're just like, right now, if anything, just by God, act as the government and represent your education system internationally.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, you think about trade missions that Canada and other countries have taken to Asia and all around the world to promote specific industries. And, you know, certainly we're going to be doing that a lot more in the coming months and years as we try to become more self-sufficient. Globalization kind of, you know, somewhat ironically, globalization will sort of get a little bit chipped away at as national governments start, you know, trying to promote their industries for export. And so I think it's interesting that you've talked about how, you know, English is a resource that we're selling, you know, very much, you know, you think of the Canadian, you know, our main export up until 5 minutes ago was oil. That's not a thing right now, just because of, you know, the damage that, you know, Russia and Saudi Arabia have done. And of course, you know, the environmental movement. So, you know, there are certain industries that are on the wane in Canada, and but we have a natural resource in the English language that we can promote, we can sell. So yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about what you envision as the government's involvement in all this.
Well, it's really quite simple. I mean, and it's a tragedy. Should be a crime, in my opinion. But like, if someone wants to immigrate to Canada, or they want to join our college or university, they take standardized tests, right? And we're talking, the most common right now is called the IELTS test, International English Language Testing System. And do you know who owns those? The British Council. So the government body of England, which represents its cultural interests around the globe, and IDP Australia, which is the International Development Program, which represents Australia's, you know, and so someone who wants to immigrate to Canada, Australia or England is making the money off of that. Now, the other choices are the same thing. So TOEFL is the American one. So if they take the TOEFL test, which is again on the wane and not so common, then an American company is making money. So we're not even making money off of, like, and not to make money isn't necessarily a profit, but we're not even able to like cover any debt, which would inevitably be accrued by our immigration and education processes. You know, other people do. And, you know, that's insane to me. I mean, even the same thing, my school had Canada in its name, but we're owned by an American investment group. So students come to Vancouver because they want to visit Canada and Vancouver and get a Canadian education, but then the monetary profit is sent outside of the country to other interests. You know, so I'm like, the government needs to go, hey, if we could just pay for our own stuff with this, wouldn't that be a great start? Which, again, was the kind of thing they've been telling us, but I don't know if you just saw, like, last week, 200 teachers in Coquitlam lost their job, right? I think we were talking about this, but they lost their job because, yeah, international students can't come. Again, what Canadians haven't seen, you know, when Gordon Campbell said, colleges are universities, this was why. The reason we have crappy housing is this, you know, basically people showed up here to learn English and they're like, wait, we can buy your houses? And they were like, yeah, sweet. You know, to me, it's like this, it's this massive driving force, again, which we're completely ignorant. So number one, I hope that by, you know, it seems to be the only way to get attention of governments is to create some sort of profit generating business at this point. But as you said, talk about expansion that's our export is this language. But when we talk to each other and we communicate with each other, I mean, what do we create and come up with? You know, what do people share? You know, what do people develop? You know what I mean? That's what we desperately want. I mean, the G7 get together and have a meeting. You're like, man, I have sat in a classroom with students from 10 different countries. arguing in a respectful manner about all kinds of things. You know what I mean? And you're like, this, that, what? It doesn't add up. So Canadian government needs to say, first of all, we are going to have our own test if we're going to do it. Number one, we should get rid of that. We need to recognize the practicality of testing language skills using technology, but also involving them in, like, for example, for me, volunteer programs are the greatest connector. Why are these people just want to go and talk to people and they want to get involved? But a lot of schools, for example, charge a fee for them to go volunteer. So, you know, Canada's losing out in so many ways, but anywhereesl.com to me is this way of really, you know, again, either you do it or you talk about it. And so, as you've probably seen, I can talk about it, but it's more important to kind of do something.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think that we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the future of English as learning English as a second language. And we've been talked about the business context of it, the history of it, the cultural aspects of it. And I'm very glad I was reminded of, you know, my days of teaching. You know, I have fond memories of teaching English before my career went through a few more, you know, pinball machine bumps and jumps to get to where I am. But I'm so excited for where you're at and what you're doing and where you're doing it. I mean, it's kind of, it doesn't matter that you're not currently in Hawaii. As far as I know, so we're both in Vancouver, Canada, and but I understand teachers from basically anywhere could sign up for this, or
that's and I want to properly scale, because I mean, this is the other thing, like there are natural segments built into all of this, and in terms of even sales. So like I said, like even on a basic barter level, free, possibly lonely people, but that's never really the best. But, you know, what I'm talking about is someone who's like, you know, what was it? The Vancouver Foundation 2012, and everyone talks about it. There's follow-up things. Everyone's lonely in Vancouver. They did a big survey. Everyone's lonely and sad. We all know that. And you're like, but everybody, there's this, over something like 52% of the Lower Mainland wasn't born here and English isn't the first language, or, you know, the way it relates to family. But everyone wants to go and drink some craft beer and talk about it. People like Captain America, and they want to share their thoughts about it. And they want to do that with someone who isn't going to be going, no, that's not the brought. It's not bringed, it's brought. You know, they want to just get in the game and play the game. You know what I mean? You pay a tennis coach to go and learn all those things and do repetitive stuff. So, you know, again, there's this, you know, what do you enjoy? There's someone out there who wants to do it with you. If you just talk to them in English, and however, it's not so simple, as you know, and that's what I mean, we can also provide with this, is this basic training of how to participate in conversations with these language learners. Because as you know, I'm sure as soon as you meet someone, you start to evaluate their language level and you start to adjust your vocabulary and your idiom use and all these quite simple things that when you think about them are basic but are never going to be natural and will cause misunderstanding. So, you know, that all the way up to, if you have something to offer in terms of teaching, now you start charging. Are you an enterprise? Boom. Now, the other thing is we have all of these other education tech providers. Is it not great to bring this sort of massive subject and audience, or then businesses in these delivery of these language learners could be saying, well, I like Thinkific, so I'm going to deliver my ESL stuff through Thinkific. Or, no, I like this WordPress, or I don't care, I'm keeping it simple. I'm just going to stay with the basic LMS that the city has on their website. But that's the dream.
Okay, well, good luck to you
Thanks, man.
in your endeavors. And if someone wanted to find out, to learn more about anywhereesl.com, where would they find it?
Anywhereesl.com. As I said, it's quite infant. It's in its infant use. I mean, the original concept was online interactive video learning, which is all part of it. And now it's like, well, why not a sales funnel, pay and scheduling portal for teachers in demand.
Yep. Works for that. That works well. Okay. Chris, it has been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thanks, man.
And
It's always great to chat with you.
I look forward to our next conversation. You have been listening to The Future of Learning English as a Second Language, and I will see you at some point in the future.